So it is 5 o'clock. And you have a beer, great. I guess we can go ahead and get started. Everybody who's here, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you all virtually. I wish we could be in a room together enjoying each other's company, but we'll do this instead. So just a little bit of housekeeping. The way that we set this up, we had a surprising amount of interest, more than we were expecting, and so we had more than 100 attendees, which meant that we couldn't do video for everybody on the Zoom account that we have. So this is set up as a webinar, which means that you can see Preston and myself, but we can't see you. We can interact with you though, and the way that we're going to ask you to do that is by sending us questions, and there on the bottom of your screen you should see something that says Q&A. And if you click on that, you can go ahead and type a question into that field and it will pop up on our screens. I have two colleagues here, Jillian Jackson and Deborah Adler, and they're going to be fielding those questions and compiling a list of questions for Preston and I to answer at the end of our conversation. So we'll spend about 30 minutes just in discussion, myself and Preston, and then we'll switch over to question and answer. You're welcome to send questions at any point during the conversation that you have them. And in the meantime, we'll just be in conversation and we'll get to those questions a little later. Sound good, Preston?
Sounds good.
Okay. So I am going to read Preston's bio briefly, just for anybody who's on the call who doesn't know Preston. Preston Singletary's art has become synonymous with the relationship between European glassblowing traditions and Northwest Native art. His artwork features themes of transformation, animal spirits, and shamanism through elegant blown glass forms and mystical sand-carved plinkett designs. Singletary learned the art of glassblowing by working with artists in the Seattle area, including Ben Moore and Dante Marioni. And as an assistant, he initially focused on mastering the European techniques and traditions. His work took him to Costa Boda in Sweden, where he studied Scandinavian design and met his wife, Åsa. Throughout his 30 years of glassblowing experience, Preston has had opportunities to learn the secrets of Venetian glassblowing by working with masters like Lino Tagliapietra, Cecco Ungaro, and Pino Signoretto. In 2010, he was awarded an honorary doctorate arts degree from the University of Puget Sound, and he's now recognized internationally, and his works are in numerous museums, including the British Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, the Seattle Art Museum, the Corning Museum of Glass, the Mint Museum, the Heard Museum, and the Smithsonian. And Preston recently, in 2018, launched a new traveling exhibition titled Raven in the Box of Daylight, which is currently in Wichita and is heading to DC to the Museum of the Native American Indian after that. So that's kind of that's Preston's background. So I think from here we'll just jump into conversation. Preston, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. I was battling a little bit of laryngitis this week, but I don't think it's anything worse than that. I'm feeling much better than I was yesterday. So my voice is able to have a conversation today.
Yeah, we were pleased to hear that you were recovering. What have you been? So we're here. We're under stay-at-home orders here in Seattle, which is why you're at home and I'm here at the gallery. What are you doing to keep busy? Are you going to the studio? Are you just working around the house?
I'm trying to keep the studio running as much as I can, or as efficiently as I can. Most of my 4 employees that help me on a daily basis are working remotely on things that they can. So they've taken work home, and you know, Celine, my business studio manager, is working remotely from home, and this has been for the past 3 weeks or so. So you know, I'm trying to keep everybody busy. I'm just, this is the only thing I know how to do, is to make the work that I do. And so I'm trying to be as, I've actually put it this way, I've found a newfound, it's a newfound uninterrupted time where I've been fairly productive actually. And as long as I can, keep everybody working and making work for the future, then I'll be making a whole large body of work over the next few months.
So is your shop up and running? I know a lot of glassblowing facilities around the country have had to shut down. Did you keep the shop hot, or are you just working on cold?
I turned it off because basically the work that I do is multi-staged. So I'll do the glass blowing part and the sculpting part, and then I'll have to cover the entire, form with rubber tape and draw on it. So I'm into the designing and drawing process right now, and that's, that takes up a lot of time. And so I've got a lot of pieces. I can make several pieces in a glass blowing session or in a week or so, and they all pile up on the back shelf in my studio. So I'm actually kind of taking them down and like, okay, we'll finish this piece, and it's been really kind of liberating actually to sort of clear the shelves a bit and try to get this work prepped and ready for production or for finishing.
Have you uncovered any wonderful forgotten treasures in that process?
It works that way a lot, where I'll find a piece that is maybe buried behind a few pieces, and then I'll maybe stockpiled it, not sure, if I would use it or not. And then sometimes it takes a couple of years even to find the possibilities in a given form. So sometimes I'll pick up a piece and I'll know, okay, now I know exactly what I can do with this or how I can, adapt a design to that particular shape. So I always made them with, some intent in mind, for the original or the final piece, but then it goes through a metamorphosis.
Sure, sure. Your show at Traver Gallery right now is called Artifacts from a Future Dream, and is largely based around objects that carry power with them, whether it's healing power, spiritual power, or cultural power. What made you want to make work with that theme?
Well, the word artifacts is kind of an interesting word. The material that I work with in glass is a non-traditional medium for native art. I mean, so, but I contend that, the longer I work with it, the more traditional it becomes. So, I've been able to bring some of my glass sculptures back into the home community up in Juneau, Alaska. And so I'm always thinking about this, like the relationship to history, the object itself, what does it represent? And so, the fact that, glass has a potential for lasting, years and years and years, hundreds of years, thousands of years. In the same sense, it's very fragile. It's a very fragile material. So it's got this really interesting dichotomy between, it could break in a second, or it could last for thousands of years. So my contention is that this is like these artifacts for a future dream. It's just kind of a poetic notion of like the creative process that I go through on a daily basis.
Yeah, it seems to have created a body of work around themes of amulets and objects that have particular like potency or power seems strangely prescient, given what we're living through right now. Were you thinking about the social and political climate when you made this work? Is this just sort of, I mean, maybe these things are always relevant. I'm sure they are always relevant, but it does feel particularly potent right now.
Well, what's really interesting is that, Native culture, we are reflecting on the past, and we're also looking to the future. A good storyteller friend of mine, Roger Fernandez, he's was talking about, we were hanging out, and he was talking about a story for any given moment that, a scenario that is suggested or is like happens organically. And he tries to tie some kind of connection to a historical story. And I found that really, really fascinating because, the way that I've analyzed the stories and the symbolism and what have you, and the intent behind these objects, they were meant to, kind of describe the natural world and to, create a connection to the cosmos. Uh, that and so these are the things that I think about based on a lot of the uh, the studies that I've done from my own around my own native culture, um, interacting with other indigenous people from all around the world, and then just in the studies that I've done that I didn't go to college, but I did. And I wasn't raised with any religious instruction, so I was naturally curious about reading about different modes of theology and uh, and philosophy, psychology. So these things are kind of an amalgamation of my whole thought process.
Hmm. Can you, I'm going to try and do this screen sharing business, and hopefully I don't have major technical difficulties. But I'm going to pull up our website, which has images of the works in the show, and I'm hoping you can tell us a little of some of the stories that inspired a few of the pieces in the show.
Sure.
Let's see if I can do this. That's not the right page. There we go. Are you seeing the work are you seeing your artwork now?
Yeah, I'm seeing the scroll.
Great. Okay, good. Technology. So yeah, give me a piece that you want to talk about and I'll pull up a larger image of it.
Well, there's the Fog Woman, which is a very interesting one, has a good story with it. Fog Woman, kind of in a nutshell, it's the raven goes to the sky world and speaks to he's met this woman who he's fallen in love with. So he goes to the sky world and he talks to the chief of the sky world, and who's the father of Fog Woman, and asks to marry her. And he gives his blessing, but he also says, I give you the blessing, but I want you to always respect and take care of my daughter. And she's very precious to me. So he agrees, and they get married. They return to the earth, the land, and they are married for a period of time. And then he starts to become a little bit abusive towards her, emotionally abusive, and then it becomes a time of famine, and times get really, really tough. And Raven becomes really frustrated with her. She's fiddling around with these cedar bark strips, and she's twining it together. And he belittles her even more and says, why are you wasting your time with this activity? We need to find food. We need to do something about this. And she says, just be patient. And so over time, she finished this form, and it became a basket. And she goes down to the stream and she dips it into the water, and then these salmon jump out of the basket. And so, of course,
what I'm seeing here. Sorry to interrupt you. So
yeah.
this is the basket and the woman and the salmon.
And so Raven's like, he's all excited and he's, eating the salmon. This is the origin of salmon, how they came into existence. So he was eating the salmon and he's, all happy with a full belly. And finally he goes looking for his wife, and she's wandered off. And so he chases after her, and then she dissipates back into fog and returns to the sky world.
She's had enough of his abuse,
of his belittling. And so that's the story. So in that case, this is one of the kind of famous stories that has a moral to the story, which is respecting women.
Respect your wife.
Right? So, of course, that's a very relative even today. Some people tend to forget that. So it was kind of fun to bring that one into an existence. And
Yeah.
this I made mention too, I work collaboratively with carvers. And so the carver of this piece was David Franklin, who's a good friend of mine. And he's like, we call him my ghost carver. Um, but I commissioned him to make these pieces. And so we'll work on the designs together. I'll sketch out some ideas and he'll take it into the carved form. And so then they're sent to the Czech Republic for casting.
Yeah, so this is a large piece. This is over 35 inches tall and probably weighs, what do you think, 200 pounds?
Plus, yeah, I haven't quite figured it out. I should put it on a scale to know. It's over 200 pounds, so it's quite a hefty piece compared to some of the other ones of that scale.
Yeah, and this is just for our audience, I have to just share that this is an interesting piece. So the photograph of it, it almost looks bronze in color, but when you see it here in the gallery with daylight, it actually is more of an amethyst color, and it changes dramatically as you move around the piece. So it's quite extraordinary actually how much the glass color shifts as you interact with it and experience the piece. And I think part of that has to do with the sheer amount of glass and the quality of the glass. The crystal kind of holds the light in a different way.
40% lead crystal. And the reason to go to the Czech Republic is because we don't make lead crystal in the States anymore. So they have a long tradition of their crystal, beads.
So I want to have you tell us about one or two other pieces as well. But before we do that, maybe this is a nice moment to just share a little bit about the very large totem that you've been working on.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on some monumental totem forms. I have a killer whale totem that is just been completed in the Czech Republic. It's about 2,800 pounds, cast in sections and then stacked up. And these pieces are, really mind-blowing when you see them. I've produced 3 of them so far, and they all reside in private homes. And so it is available. So it is a substantial piece, one of the most, expensive pieces I've ever made, but Sarah knows all about it, so she can tell you more about it for those who might be interested.
Yeah, and when one of these days we'll get it from the Czech Republic to Seattle when all of our restrictions have been lifted and we can move freely again. Let's see, let's have you talk about a different piece here. Oh, back on our homepage, excuse me. How about this collaboration that you did with Spike Mafford? Can you talk a little bit about that? This is a really different direction for you.
Yeah, this was really fun to work with. Spike and I have been known each other since very young, from like middle school age. And then we've become established artists in our own right. Him as a fine art photographer and commercial photographer. And so we had the idea to work on this piece together. And I was really, really open to, the ideas. We started talking about how do we integrate, photography with glass. So we came up with this piece. This is the first one of hopefully many that we've got lots of ideas that we're going to try to develop when we can get back to work and get back to hanging out together and stuff. But this one was called The Spirit of Cedar. And so these are cedar trees that were photographed by Spike and then inlaid into this box, which was typically traditionally made out of cedar. So so he cut those photographs out and mounted them on plexiglass, translucent plexiglass, and then it's lit from inside. And it has, four sides, images on four sides, and it is, on this pedestal. So there's a couple of different angles there, and so you can see subtly. I've actually carved some really kind of sweeping lines that are based on some of the design work that I do, and so that part's very subtle. These pieces integrate really nicely, I think. There's
Cool.
so
Yeah,
the
it's
car.
exciting to see. It's exciting to see the combination of both of your medias. It's really, it's a compelling new direction, and I know that you guys are going to continue to work on this. So I'll look forward to sharing those works with folks as they develop.
And some of the themes that we had, or the ideas we had about working, was, how could we convey the idea of the natural world, and Spike spends a lot of time in the in nature and camping and stuff, and so we were talking about, like, how could we evoke the feeling of this compassion for nature, in the context of art. So we've got a lot of ideas cooking. It'll be fun to work on them.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see, we've got only about 10 minutes left before we're going to jump into question and answer. So let's see, I guess one question I have for you, who are some of the artists that you look to for inspiration, for guidance, for mentorship? Who are your inspiring artists?
Well, I mean, contemporary artists. I mean, I look at, Joe David, Robert Davidson, from the native perspective. Also, because I come from this glassmaking tradition, I can't help but also have, a love and appreciation for, Lino Tagliapietra and Dante Marioni, people who, as an object maker, as we make glass and from all different perspectives. I mean, I used to help those guys make their work, and so I really, appreciate it on a very deep level in terms of the craftsmanship that goes into it, and I've learned a lot of that, that I apply to my own work. If you look at looking back, I mean, as I mentioned, I didn't go to school for art. I, kind of fell right into glass blowing right after high school. So I was forced to look at, other artists for inspiration. I first came from the surrealists, because I was kind of curious about, what was going on there. The surrealists talked about, the issue of being, well, the surrealist and the Dada movement and all of these sort of iconoclastic art movements are what really drive me, or what inspire me. And so how do you take that and sort of turn it into cultural art, and also, I don't know, the figurative and narrative? I mean, my whole process has gone from becoming sort of a classical glass blowing, classically trained glass blower, and working with people that were working with high design, like Benjamin Moore and, Dante and Lino, as I mentioned, to looking at more figurative and narrative work, which I was completely dismissive of, in the beginning. It was like, you have to make the thing and it has to look really cool, and what makes it look good and what makes it look cool. Well, okay. Then I started to look at, the decorative arts of the 30s and 40s, when I was, making more blown glass objects. Looked at, that era in the Venetian you know, oh shoot, Martinuzzi, Napoleon Martinuzzi, Carlos Scarpa, all of these artists, and then, but then kind of going back and forth, and you know, along the whole spectrum. Then I get into sort of the whole primitivism movement and these, you know, the Max Ernst and this whole kind of psychological approach to art making. And you know, the whole genre of primitivism was inspired by the modernists who were looking at so-called primitive art to for inspiration. So that's still a running theme, dialogue in my head around, you know, the things that inspire me.
That's interesting. You talk about how the modernists were using these sort of more primitive art forms as inspiration for their contemporary work. And here you are kind of flipping that on its head and inverting it. That's a really cool, it's kind of claiming
You know,
it.
they sort of appropriate, you know, these, you know, in one catalog, they referred to, they called it non-technological cultures, you know. So, and you know, then the modernists were really, what they were really trying to do is deconstruct their thought process from this, you know, kind of trained learning and become more open and exposed, you know, to this more spiritual, you know, connection to art making. And you know, for me, in the end of the day, it it is all spiritual. You know, it's a meditative process. We talk about, you know, this time in our world where we're all in this same place, and you know, some of the teachers that I've worked with and mentors, Walter Porter was a man who was a mythologist, and he's what, you know, gave me a lot of insight to mythology from a Tlingit perspective. And he said, you know, he was the one that, you know, talked about, you know, look at the lily, it neither spins nor toils. Now, what does that mean for an artistic process? It means that you have to clear your mind and slow your mind down from the chatter that kind of, you know, our internal chatter that keeps going. And from that standpoint is where a lot of creativity, a lot of creative thoughts come from. And, you know, it reminds me of another discussion I had many years ago about confining someone from the Western culture versus the Eastern culture. If you take an Asian person and you lock them in a room, you know, they're just gonna, you know, the theory is that they have been trained spiritually, you know, to, if they have Buddhist, you know, philosophies, or that they can meditate and they can go inward. But if you lock a Western person into a room, they're going to go crazy. They're going to, like, you know, be, you know, beating on the door and trying to get out and figuring, you know, but that's where they're, so I take a lot of inspiration from that. And I think the process of making art is also one that is very deeply reflectful, you know, deep reflection. It is something that, you know, when we get into that state, then things, you know, things flow out of us as artists. And so that's something that I try to tap into as best I can.
Well, I know that having your show here in the gallery, this is true every time we have a show of yours in the gallery, but maybe I have more space to think about it and observe it right now since I'm the only one here. It really, I feel like you create a space with your work where that kind of contemplation can occur. And the pieces really do invite the viewer in to sit with them for a while and to really look at both the figurative elements of them, but also the way the light pours through them at certain moments, or these more quiet, subtle things as well. Not to mention just the form line design. You know, I feel like I've learned a lot from you and over the years and watching your design develop about form line in general and how those design elements work and pair together in certain ways, and how they can be used for figurative elements, but also just graphic elements as well. So anyway, thank you. We should probably open this up to question and answer now. I feel like that's a pretty nice thought to end on. Thanks, Preston. So I am going to go ahead and look at what's been sent to me in these chats. And I think we'll just go in the order that we've received them. So I don't have names attached to these, so I'm just going to read them straight from here, and we'll answer them. So the first one says, I think Raven watches over his feast is one of the most beautiful pieces you have ever done. Can you talk about your inspiration for this piece and your unusual choice of color? So
yeah, that was a piece that was kind of reflecting on a traditional form. It was, excuse me. So it's inspired by a grease dish that would typically be used for dipping dried fish into this grease that was rendered from seal oil or hooligan oil. This candlefish, oily fish. So these oils were very sought after. I mean, they were very special because they did add a lot of flavor to the fish. And actually, we all know that fish oil, these oils are really good for our constitution and our nutritional health. Yeah, that was a very happy accident that it came out so well. I was pleased with how it came out. The red little nubbins are sort of, made to represent operculum, which is basically a little shell, little mollusk shell, which was like the bivalve, and those were collected, and they're small like that. They're only like maybe about half an inch. They're little oval forms, and they're often used to ornament objects or used as teeth in masks. And so this was just a way of creating the highlight. The choice of color was also kind of a new exploration in color for me. I mean, I was playing with these more kind of subtle pastel colors, and so those were why I kind of went that direction. For the past year, I've been trying to break out of my color rut, as I call it, and trying to break out and do new things.
Cool, thank you. Let's see, the next question is, has this time of sheltering in place away from the shop given you any new perspectives or inspirations that we'll see reflected in future work?
Well, the need for conveying aspects of the culture has always been a thing for me, in terms of like I was encouraged by Walter Porter, who I talked about earlier, who gave me a lot of inspiration and knowledge about his exploration of mythology. And he was really adamant about me trying to get deeper into the symbolism and the story. He says, your work can maybe be equated with, the lovely hula dancer who is like, this, beautiful girl who's like moving in this grass skirt, and, and it's beautiful to look at, but she's actually telling the story, well, of course men also do the hula dance, but that was his analogy. He says, so he was always pushing me to get deeper into the the symbolism and the stories, and share that as broadly as I can. So for me, it's become sort of like, you know, uh, you know, we used to we did a series of lectures together. We call it Spokesman for Culture, and so he would kind of talk about his philosophy and tying things together in a global perspective through mythology, and then I would talk about how I try to attempt that. So I feel like, a lot of the work that I'm working on now, I'm having a lot of, so the evolution can come through just new designs that if I'm come into my studio and look at a piece, I just start drawing. Sometimes I draw with an intent. Sometimes I draw, um, I just have to start putting lines down. It's like calligraphy. It's like a process that I get into. And so I think that I think that the world has changed for all of us because we've never had to experience something like this. And I think that, when I get back into the glass blowing studio, making new objects, I think that's when you're going to see that reflection on what we've been going through right now.
This next question is sort of perfect for this follow-up question. You have all these treasured stories, Preston, that you're translating into glass. What are you doing to engage the next generation of glass artists, specifically glass artists, in keeping those stories alive?
Yeah, it's interesting. I often share this story about my friend Swill Canham, who is a Lummi tribal native member, and he plays the violin, and he's an amazing storyteller, actor, musician, and he for many years put himself out to any community that would ask him to come and perform and be a motivational speaker, usually typically for native communities where they didn't have a lot of money, couldn't offer him a whole lot, but he asked me one time, he said, how did you allow yourself to become so successful? And I said, I don't know what you mean by that at all. How did I allow myself to become so successful? I mean, here I was, in the glass blowing community, and we're all working hard and making things and trying to build our repertoire and our, connections with galleries and all this stuff. And I said, okay, well, I don't know how to answer that. But anyways, so I dismissed it and we went on with our conversation. But I always thought about that. And then I came back to him about a year later and I said, Swill Canham, you asked me this question one time and I didn't really know how to answer it. Like, how did I allow myself to become so successful? And he says, well, that's okay. I've already answered it for you. And I said, okay, so what's my answer? And he said, well, some of us are just out there being an example, leading by example, and you don't even realize it. And he said, so you are one of those people. You're out there, you're showing, you're inspiring our community, our native community. They're looking at you and they're seeing what you do and you're inspiring them and you don't even realize it. I mean, you're not directly connected to them, but on some level it's happening. So that's what he informed me. And I was like, well, there you go. Okay. I'm good with that, because if I can inspire the next generation to try something new and take a risk and develop something, maybe it's going to be a new material, maybe it's going to be concrete, maybe it's going to be steel, who knows? But if I can inspire the next generation to do something, around the cultural art, then I would regard it as a success. I hope question.
Yeah, I think that answers it beautifully. And, I do think that that's true. I mean, I think just in your in your success, in your work, I feel like you do, that is inspiration. That some people do, you know, the way that they're going to inspire the next generation is they're going to be teachers and they're going to be engaged directly, hands-on with folks. But it also takes artists like yourself who are actually making the work that inspires us to really show the way forward, which I think you do really successfully. So the next question is, what's the story that inspired the piece that's behind me here, which is called Into Clear Water?
Well, so that was, kind of a newer interpretation of a cultural hero in a story called Natslane, and that's the figure that is kind of crouched down below, and so excuse me. Sorry. Now it's catching up to me. So anyway, he's the creator of the killer whale in that story. So he is a successful individual, in everything he does, hunting, fishing, whatever it is. And so his brothers-in-law are basically getting, sick and tired of hearing about Natslane and how good he is and all, the good qualities that he possesses. And so they said, "Hey, let's go out and go hunting, sea lion hunting." So he says, "Oh, sure." So he jumps in the canoe with them, and they paddle way out to the middle of, far out into the water, into the ocean. And so Natslane jumps off the boat and, ready to, spear the first sea lion that he can find. And he looks back, and his brothers-in-law have left. They're paddling away, leaving him stranded on this rock. Long story short, he eventually arranges to meet the sea lion people, and they manage to get him back to his village. And so where he instructs his wife to grab his carving tools. So in his hand, you can see he's holding a D-adze, a hand adze. So he carves this cedar log and transforms it into this creature. Turns out to be the killer whale. And so he breathes life into it, and he sends it on.
Killer whale here, right?
Yeah, that's the killer whale. And so he sends it to kill his brothers-in-law. So when they're out on a hunting expedition or fishing, they're out in their canoe, and the killer whale comes and attacks the canoe, and they drown at sea. And so, and in the amulet form, the piece that is sticking onto it is another just kind of a charm or protection amulet that is typically carved out of bone, or something that we like to wear as a necklace piece.
Great, thank you. The next question is a great one. Do you have a favorite book that you go to for learning the Tlingit legends, and can you share that with us so that we can read?
Yeah. There's a couple of really, really good ones. There's one called Tangible Visions. It's kind of like almost like the Bible of the Tlingit, spiritual objects, the shaman objects, the rattles and the little amulets, clothing, things that were associated with shamanic materials. And to me, working with the shamanic themes, it doesn't directly translate into a specific, thing, but it alludes to the spirituality of the community, in my opinion. Northwest Coast art, there's so much issue of intellectual property, and certain, symbols pertain or relate, or they're like family property. We call it atu, And what it means is it's something that is like an heirloom, I guess is the best possible word. It's something that's handed down through generations and generations. And sometimes things could be made for a specific, a specific ceremony, a potlatch ceremony. And then these things were given a significance and power by being brought out into that ceremonial way. So, I mean, obviously, my things aren't brought out in a ceremonial way. But they represent the idea of spiritual connection to in the form of art.
Thank you, Preston. Next question is, where can we learn about the designs used in your work? The person asking this question says, we have an oyster catcher, a Tlingit monolith, a raven rattle, and several baskets. The carvings in the sculptures and baskets are different, but in the sculptures, several of the motifs seem similar. I'd like to learn what they mean and how you chose them. And then second question, are you mentoring any new artists?
Well, those pieces, the oyster catcher rattle, you can find a lot of information about oyster catcher rattles in that book, Tangible Visions. There was also another really, really good book that was written by Bill Holm, who was a professor emeritus at the University of Washington. And he wrote a book called Analysis of Form. And that basically gives a lot of information about the form line, how the form line, he breaks it down in sort of a systematic way, which becomes much easier to understand when you look at his book and how he created sort of a vocabulary around it, which we call form line. That's where he's the guy that gave it that term. And then as far as the mentoring, I have a couple of artists that I work with, and I would say that I mentor them. I mean, so Nahan is like a guy that I play music with in a band called Kuik, and it was a group that is based around our cultural music, and it's kind of an evolution, a reinterpretation of the cultural music, but it's kind of in a funk jazz vein. And then Sandra Segundo is also the singer in that group as well. And so those are two artists that I work with on a semi-regular basis, and they'll bring me designs to look at, and I'll kind of scratch my head with them and sort of help them understand how these connecting, how the form line connects together, and maybe give them some more insight.
I'm actually gonna jump out of line here and read a question that I saw that came in from Russell Johnson, just because it's a little bit related to what you're talking about right now. So Russell wants to know, how is music integral to your creative process?
I'm getting hand signals here. Move out of the. Well, for me, music has always been like a constant, source of inspiration. I mean, music is never not happening in my studio. It's was my first love. I thought I would, my first chosen profession would have been rock star, but it didn't pan out for me. So the music that we do in the Kuik group is kind of like the musical version of what I do with my artwork. So we take the cultural perspectives. We're working with language preservation. We're kind of collaborating with jazz musicians who can take the music to a different level, a different place. So we have both traditional people who are raised with cultural understanding and protocols, and stories and the access to certain songs and knowledge, and so we're trying to create a unique musical experience. I mean, we're going to be, hopefully, once this opens up a little bit, we're going to be launching a new fundraising campaign for our fourth album that we would like to put out. It's a triple LP, and we're working on the designing of the record cover right now. It'll come out in vinyl LPs as well as digital download.
Cool. I can attest to the fact that music is perpetually playing in Preston's studio. Every time we go over there, he has to shout at somebody to turn the music down. But it's a wonderful environment, and it feels very inspiring all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So this comes from from Kristen Miller-Zone, who is the curator at the Lauren Rogers Museum of Art in Laurel, Mississippi. And she says, we have an excellent collection of Native American baskets. Can you tell us a bit about how baskets figure into your work?
Yeah, the baskets for me were kind of came from a respect and sort of a focus on the geometric designs, and as I was exploring ways of interpreting, cultural forms, this came to mind, and so it was several years of evolution trying to create, the texture of basket, the weave look, as well as the geometric designs, and so the geometric designs are all very specific to Tlingit style, or Alaskan, Tlingit Haida are very similar in their culture. I mean, at one point, these larger basket forms became more of a tourist trade item. And so a lot of the things were maybe not representational of specific symbols, but more decorative. And because they're trying to, create commerce and try to make money in this new reality of the economy, prior to contact was all through, bartering and subsistence living. And so a lot of these, baskets are things that I've looked at, studied in books, but more specifically, Alaska Native art.
I know some of the baskets you've been making recently are quite large. Is that just an exploration in terms of scale, or what?
Well, yeah, the larger baskets were sort of, there's always this kind of stigmatism around glass blowing, oh, it's a big, it's a big thing, and watching the guys, lift these pieces around, or it's always such a thing around that, Dale Chihuly making the giant, forms like that or whatever. And so I'm not, able to make, giant things. So I rely on my friends to come help me with that. So usually I get like David Walters and people like that, Eric Wall, who can lift those big, that are taller than me and stronger than me. So I just kind of work with them on those forms. But yeah, I was compelled to do that, make the larger ones. And, but the thing is that there's so much work that, you make a piece that's this big to a piece that's this big, it becomes that much more work. And so it becomes almost impossible to kind of recoup the time that you spent on it, really, honestly, in the bottom line. But like my friend Marcus Ammerman, he always referred to his beadwork. He would stitch this beadwork together for bracelets and larger pieces, and he'd call it the power of tedium. This weaving pattern is so time consuming, that, and really it's kind of lost on the viewer unless they really understand what it is, how much work actually went into the piece. I mean, there's, good 30 hours of work that goes into each large basket, compared to the smaller ones. So I don't know,
Yeah.
but I had to try it.
Well, they're beautiful. In fact, some of those larger ones, I think just by virtue of the scale, they start to kind of get a little bit more varied in shape. It's
Right.
a little bit softer sometimes than some of the smaller ones, like the weight of the basket almost. Is,
I like when they're a little wiggly like that, because then.
yeah, I think they're really beautiful. Let's see. Are you doing any more Haida hats? I think we mean Tlingit hats.
Oh, yeah.
We have one and we love it. And the second question is, have you been influenced by William Morris's work?
Yeah, I mean, the hat form is a piece that, again, it's kind of like a blank canvas for me. And, it's all about the illustrative style, the design that I put down, which changes over time. I mean, I like to equate, the form line with calligraphy. Your own style tends to emerge the more that you practice, doing it. And so that's very true with the form line art that I do. And so those pieces I think I'll always make them. I haven't made many in a while, but maybe it's time to revisit them. I have several piled up in my back of my room, which, now that I've gotten past the first layer, I'm finding what's left. And so I'll probably make a few of those in the coming year. And William Morris, of course, is an amazing inspiration, for sure. He's one of those guys I would include in one of my bigger inspirations, because he really pioneered that whole style of sculpting forms and working with different cultural styles. And so that was really amazing work, and very very inspirational.
Wonderful. Question for you. The piece behind you, is that a Courtney Branham piece?
Yes, it is.
It's lovely.
It is. It's like that. We picked it up at the Pilchuck auction. We were about ready to. You know how it goes at the Pilchuck auction. There's those moments of excitement and weakness. So we were really happy to get that one. We were gonna go directly to him, but because he's a close friend of mine, but maybe try to do a trade. But we decided to support Pilchuck.
Nice. Okay, so last two questions here. First is, can you tell us about the Burke Museum installation?
The Burke Museum installation was, that was an amazing project that I worked on with some local Salish artists, the Sklallam, and they were Brian Perry, and geez, what's his, just my brain's going now.
We'll look it up. We can Google it.
Anthony Jones, and Brian Perry, Anthony Jones. We worked on this together to create we called the Weaver's Welcome. They wanted to give the Burke kind of collaborated on that title, and we were happy to do it. But we were kind of honoring the weavers of which was such a big tradition of this region, and so we looked at objects from the Burke collection, and decided that a welcome figure would be appropriate to make. And so it's a steel and glass combination with a steel armature holding up these glass castings, and I think it's about 12 feet tall. But it turned out beautifully. Just an amazing monumental glass sculpture, one of the first in the Northwest, of that style, the native style glass castings.
Yeah, and for those who are out of town or who don't know what the Burke Museum is, the Burke Museum is on the University of Washington campus, and it's a natural history museum, and has an extraordinary collection. And they just recently rebuilt the museum facility, and it is just opened in the spring, last spring or last fall, maybe 6 months ago.
It was last fall,
Last fall. Okay.
or late, like early fall, or somewhere like that. I don't know.
But it's
Uh,
extraordinary, and it follows I think a lot of museums are doing, kind of uh, like removing the walls so that you can see how the museum functions. So you can actually watch the scientists while they're working and preserving the artifacts and animals and things.
yeah.
In town, come visit it. And the last question is a fun one. What's happening to the exhibitions of Raven and the Box of Daylight? Is the Raven under quarantine?
Raven is quarantined. Yes, it's it is currently at the Wichita Art Museum. We did have the opening ceremony in early February, and then of course it was closed down like the rest of the country. And I did ask them. I mean, the exhibition turned out, the installation turned out beautifully. We had the opportunity to change some colors and the kind of the flow of the exhibition, which changes from venue to venue. So that was uh, that was an interesting, process, very creative. And but I did reach out to them most recently because I asked them, well, is there anything we can do to engage the audience? And I'd seen Judith Schechter had a show, and she made like a Vimeo, or the museum had put a little Vimeo thing together that they could share, with the public through social media. And so I asked them, why don't you get like a videographer to kind of, wander through the galleries, and then, we can sort of create a narrative around it, or, do some social media postings or whatever, so people can still engage a little bit, even though they can't be there. So I think they're working on it, but so that was a good prompt. Now they're getting on it, and we're gonna try to put something together.
Wonderful. And next stop with that is the Smithsonian. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, it'll be scheduled to open up in the Smithsonian around October 8th. And so, when the summer, as it finishes up at Wichita, hopefully they'll be able to reopen, have people enjoy it. I mean, this was pretty disheartening, that, this was where the show was supposed to, reach a lot of people outside of the Northwest. And so unfortunately, it's under quarantine. I don't know. Anyways, we will survive.
Yeah. You mentioned that they're working on a video tour of that exhibition. I just wanted to let everybody who's still here with us know that there is a video tour of Preston's show at Traver Gallery, and that's on our website. So if you go to the homepage and you click on his exhibition, the very first thing you'll see is a box pop up, and that is a link to a Vimeo video that should, you just press the middle of it, it'll start playing, and you can get a virtual tour of the exhibition. And there's one last question that came in from Marianne, asking if we can share the link to see Raven in the Box of Daylight. And Marianne, yeah, we will send, we'll definitely repost that to our social media accounts and to our website as soon as it's available, so you can check back on that. And it is 6:05, so I think everybody's probably eager, if they're on the West Coast, to get cooking dinner, and if they're on the East Coast, to settle in to read their books for the evening and chill out. So I just want to say thank you, Preston, very much for doing this with us. I'm sorry that your exhibitions are happening during this time and that not more people are able to see them in person, because it really is extraordinary work. Our exhibition will be, we've canceled our May show, so Preston's show will be up through May. And if restrictions are lifted and people can come visit, we would invite you to do so. And we will be, we're here on an on appointment basis. So if you are feeling brave and want to come downtown with masks and gloves on, you're more than welcome to schedule an appointment to visit solo. And yeah, thank you all very much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Preston, and say good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.